makes the night go dark. I know it's hard to find the light. Your mind is searching for a spark, another way to make it right. When you feel it in your heart, there's a chance to make it right. We can go back to the start. Let your mind be free to fly and fly and fly. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. Keep an open heart and mind. They say good things will come to you. In reverse or in rewind, the better days will see you through. Take a breath, open your eyes. It's just you and me tonight. We can go back, we can try. Let your mind be free to fly and fly and fly. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. Flying in the air, don't need sound. You and when we fly in the air, I'm always there. Just slow down and find me. Flies always there. I'm always there. Focus on me. Flies always there. Keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me.
And welcome to For Such a Time as This. We're not going to do a round table. I'm doing solo today. If you are in the chat room, please let me know I'm coming through loud and clear. Let me know I'm coming through loud and clear. Gonna try something new, expand our wings, do more of a live show instead of recordings. We are going to talk about random topics, as always, through a biblical view. Random topics, as always, through a biblical view. So here's what we've got this morning. We'll go as long as it takes to cover the material I have, and we'll cap it off at about 2 hours. I'm not going past that. So we're going to start off with the national anthem. This young man who's in D.C. schools, 9-year-old. We're going to start off with the anthem with him, and then we'll come back From there, we'll talk about Joe Biden and the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful address to the Congress he had just recently. We'll go over Tim Scott's rebuttal. This is not a racist nation. And when we do that, we'll bring in Jack from the Brothers Bell. Jack will commentate for us. He's smarter than I am, so he'll give his take on that. We'll talk about that pastor in Canada. As you see, they're after him, and he actually has a message asking for our help. So we'll talk and deal with the pastor from Canada. If we have time, we'll get into the Florida elections, and then we'll get into we'll get into Bruce Jenner, who's come out against transgender men in girls' sports. And remember, Bruce Jenner, who now goes by Caitlyn Jenner, but he'll always be Bruce to me. We're going to talk about why Bruce is against transgenders in sports. Good luck in explaining that, Bruce. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the new bill for schools' health rules here in Illinois, the takeover of all parochial and private schools through the health department, saving you against your will. But before we go any further, just want to, as always, hold on, I got to fix something here. As always, want to encourage you to go to our website, for such a time as this .today, There you can always get our newest content as Big Brother continues to squeeze, as Big Brother continues to wipe out all opposition to the new world order, to the new coming world order, as Big Brother continues to wipe out all Christian commentary on the world that's coming. You can always go to our website, find our new material, stay in contact with us there if Big Brother continues to wipe us out and continues to censor us. And I have no doubt they are continuing to censor us because we give the biblical view on the world that is happening. Okay, so without further ado, let us start off this morning with the singing of the salute to the flag. Here we go.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? We're so proud of the brave.
That was a beautiful rendition from a young man, 9 years old. I'm shocked that they still sing. I'm surprised they still do that in public schools in D.C. nonetheless. Great way to start the show. All right, so let's get into it. Before we do that, I just want to, let's set the stage here. Let's set the stage. It is the Bible Gateway. I just want to start off with Scripture, Bible Gateway. I just want to read Romans 1 as we look into what is going on in our country, as we look at our president, famous Bible app here, BibleGateway.com. Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Unrighteousness suppress the truth. Their unrighteousness, they suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. They are without excuse. Look up at the sun. Look up at the stars. Look at the moon. You know man did not create that in a laboratory. They are without excuse. Verse 21, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Verse 24, therefore God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth. Here it is. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. What we see in our country nowadays, what we see all over in our country, in our world, the problem is we have exchanged the truth for a lie. We have rejected God. We have willingly taken to ourselves that which we know is not true, according to Romans 1. They are without excuse. It's very clear by what you see. You look up at the sun, you look up at the moon, you look up at the stars. You know man didn't create that. There is a being outside of our world that did that. And all you got to do is do any amount of honest investigation, and you will arrive at the God of the Bible. I am convinced that is what the scriptures say. And so what you're going to hear now, is what happens when you reject God. Okay, here's our commander-in-chief, some of his highlights, if you can say that. Highlights, lowlights. Here's his highlights of his address to Congress. Here it is. Oops, wrong one. Hold on. Here it is. I want to go back to the young man singing. Here it is.
Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, no president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words, and it's about time. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. 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 For me, when I think climate change, I think jobs. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. Electrical workers, IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways so we can own the electric car market. And our own vaccine supply, as it grows to meet our needs, and we're meeting them, will become an arsenal for vaccines for other countries, just as America is an arsenal for democracy for the world, and in consequence influence the world. And we won't television the viciousness of the hate crimes we've seen over this past year and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans. For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back. Another thing,
for those young people who are confused about their sex, I just want to let you know your president is going to help you in your confusion and further the delusion that you can change your sex. At least that's what I heard. It is what it is, people. And sad to say, when you look for honest reporting and honest news concerning American politics, not sure you can get it from American media. I have gravitated now to media out of Australia because there's a bloke there who is pretty honest with his assessment, at least in my opinion. He's honest in his assessment of American politics and the American president. I've got 3 clips from him. We're going to go through this, and then we're going to look at Tim Scott's rebuttal, and I'll bring in Jack from the Brothers Bell. But let us look at this bloke from Australia as he gives his opinion on American politics. Here he is.
Well, we ignore at our peril the weak leadership in America. And we're now seeing the consequences of this around the world. Myanmar, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and I will say something later about France. President Biden addressed a joint session of Congress today. This bloke is without shame. He hailed the COVID-19 vaccines distributed across the United States as a dose of hope. That hope, Mr. Biden, was launched on Trump's watch. Trump ordered millions of vaccines before anyone thought of it. Only last week, Biden was telling the world in a virtual summit on climate change, and note Biden wearing a mask, the only one, but the world's biggest polluter, if carbon dioxide is pollution, is China. They're promising net zero emissions by 2060, 10 years after our commitment to 2050, when our economies will be trashed.
Not sure I would take credit for the vaccine, but that's my opinion. But what you see is President Biden and what they're doing automatically, without shame, is rewriting history before your very eyes. And what you see here is America when all other leaders in a room by themselves, no one there to infect. They don't have their mask on. But what does our glorious leader do? Because he is so much more careful and so much more loving that he doesn't want to affect the people that he's on the Zoom call with. In his compassion, he wears a mask. America leading the way. The bloke down there in Australia has more to say.
A week after the virtual climate summit, Biden had no direct condemnation today of China's pollution or military aggression. What he said was, quote, "In my discussion with President Xi, I told him we welcome the competition." What the hell's that about? "We're not looking for conflict," unquote. Well, of course, there will be no conflict. China is playing Biden off a break. Tony Abbott summed it up brilliantly last weekend when he wrote, quote, "There's been the militarisation of the South China Sea, the bullying of neighbours, even India, the trade boycotts against Australia, the abrogation of the One Country, Two Systems Treaty on Hong Kong, the mass internment of the Uyghurs, and most dangerous for the wider world, the growing belligerence towards Taiwan, a liberal democracy of 25 million people that should not have to submit just because it was part of China more than 100 years and 2 world wars ago," unquote. And of course, China is militarising ports across our region. It's invaded Taiwan's airspace. What did the leader of the free world have to say in his first address about any of that today? Nothing.
Nothing. And here's where it's dangerous for us, people. Since the end of World War II, there's been one check on Marxism. That's been the United States of America. Whether it was in Korea, Vietnam, whether it was in the Philippines, again, we can debate the Korean War and Vietnam. I don't think we should have been in those conflicts. And I think if we're going to get into a conflict, we get into a conflict to win. But whether it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, or whether it was a check on the Castro brothers in Cuba to make sure that their Marxism did not spread in the Western Hemisphere. The United States has always been the check against the godless ideology of Marxism. Well, it's no longer the case. China has emerged stronger, just as strong as, if not stronger than the USSR in the Cold War. And now with Biden at the head, there is no check on the Marxist ideology, the godly ideology, the government that when they take over, Christianity is wiped out under their rule. They're now pushing in Taiwan. They're now pushing all over the world. And what is Biden and his administration doing? Nothing. Not even a word on the aggression of China. And people see it. And people see it. This is what leads to wars and rumors of wars. And as believers, we have to understand the times. We look at it. Yes, our faith is not in government. Never has, never should be, ever. But understanding our times and the country that we live in and love, the reality is these are dangerous times. This is dangerous times, because we have a man in the White House who I believe is not calling the shots. He's not calling the shots. I don't think he's cognitively capable of calling the shots, as Alan Jones points out in his next criticism of the leader of the free world.
And you mean to say this bloke Biden isn't cognitively delinquent? Have a listen to this, the President of the United States of America.
We have to do more than just build back better. We have to build back better. With regard to Russia, I know it concerns some of you, but I made very clear to Putin that we're not going to seek escalation.
Putting Biden in this position of leading the world's democracies is elder abuse. His incoherence is not new, but it surely can't go on. There will have to be a presidential resignation shortly. Listen to this from only a couple of weeks ago.
The only way to spare more pain and more loss, the only way, these millstones no longer mark our national mourning. These milestones, I should say, no longer mark our national mourning.
God help me. And then this.
I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
This is the leader of the free world. How can we believe any self-respecting world leader will take this bloke seriously? Can you imagine what it's like talking to him live? One wag had it right with a meme that was posted on social media that says it all. Hey, Sleepy Joe, I think it'd be less confusing if you just turned the teleprompter around and let us read it for ourselves.
All right. Ashley, I'm going to get to your question here. Ashley says, Pastor, please explain what Marxism is. To my understanding, is dividing people up in order to create a socialistic society. Yes, and we'll get more in depth with that when I bring on Jack. He's smarter than I am, Ashley, and I'll have him explain more of that. We'll tackle that, I promise you. So here you have Joe Biden. There it is. That's the president. That is the president. He is the president. And I love this country, as I'm sure most of you love this country. And we scratch our heads and we ask our questions. The question, how did we get here? How did we get here? Well, I'll tell you how. It's when Christians refused, or I shouldn't say refused, when Christians left the battlefield in the public arena and retreated to our four walls in the church. That's my opinion. You may have yours. By all means, give me your opinion. But Here's one of the things that came out of the speech that Biden had and the rebuttal from Tim Scott, as Tim Scott attacked this one aspect of Joe Biden's whole one of Joe Biden's pillars of ruling: systemic racism, white supremacy. And Tim Scott had the rebuttal, and here's what he says here.
Nowhere do we need common ground more desperately than in our discussions of race. I have experienced the pain of discrimination. I know what it feels like to be pulled over for no reason, to be followed around the store while I'm shopping. I remember every morning at the kitchen table, my grandfather would open the newspaper and read it, I thought. But later I realized he had never learned to read it. He just wanted to set the right example. I've also experienced a different kind of intolerance. I get called Uncle Tom and the N-word by progressives, by liberals. Just last week, a national newspaper suggested my family's poverty was actually privilege because a relative owned land generations before my time. Believe me, I know firsthand our healing is not finished. In 2015, after the shooting of Walter Scott, I wrote a bill to fund body cameras. Last year, after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I built an even bigger police reform proposal. But my Democratic colleagues blocked it. I extended an olive branch. I offered amendments, but Democrats used a filibuster to block the debate from even happening. My friends across the aisle seemed to want the issue more than they wanted a solution. But I'm still working. I'm hopeful that this will be different. When America comes together, we've made tremendous progress, but powerful forces want to pull us apart. 100 years ago, kids in classrooms were taught the color of their skin was their most important characteristic. And if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. Today, kids are being taught that the color of their skin defines them again. And if they look a certain way, they're an oppressor. From colleges to corporations to our culture, people are making money and gaining power by pretending we haven't made any progress at all, by doubling down on the divisions we've worked so hard to heal. You know this stuff is wrong. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country.
And for saying that America is not a racist country, you can't say that, Tim Scott, because our country is built upon, at least one particular political party is built upon the premise that America, and sad to say, a lot of people in the church has bought into that our country and our system and even our church is racist. With that, I'd like to bring in someone smarter than I, half of the Brothers Bell, Jack. Jack, welcome to For Such a Time as This Live.
Hey, Pastor James, thanks.
Good. So what is your take on Tim Scott? You saw his response there. You saw what Joe Biden says, and then we're going to tackle this article here. But what is your take on what you heard from the president and Tim Scott?
Well, I mean, what Tim Scott said, it hit a nerve among the leftists.
Yes, it did. Yes, it
because
did.
he's got the pedigree to say these things, so they can't really attack his background.
Yeah.
And especially because he comes from the South as well, right?
Yeah. And what does he
so
say
he's
from cotton fields to Congress? Is that his
Yeah,
take
so
now?
even in his ancestry, right?
Yeah.
So you can't really assail his pedigree, his background of who he is. So when he says things like America's not racist and throws it in their face, you get the reaction like we saw on Twitter where he was trending as Uncle Tim.
Uncle Tim.
Where they use it as a pejorative to kind of denounce anyone who's black that doesn't toe the Democrat Party line.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that the NAACP came to his defense and said that they should not do that, right?
Did they? I didn't see that.
Didn't the Congressional Black Caucus come to his defense and said
Oh no,
that?
I didn't see that either.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. I didn't see. Nobody saw it. That's the problem. And he actually said that. He called them out, saying, "Where are you? Is it okay to use derogatory terms to certain blacks if they're not in the right party? I mean, what is it? I mean, what is it?" So there we have it. The Democratic Party seems like their whole premise is race. Everything is race.
So if Tim Scott was really wanting to fire off, he would say America's not a racist country, but the Democrat Party is a racist party. If he really wanted to, actually really go out there and go after the truth, that's what I would like to hear, because it would have been even more accurate.
Yeah. Before we get, I want to go over this because this guy on CNN, he wrote an article, and I want to look at it and analyze it for people who have read it. It's up on our Facebook page. But before we get to that, let's take on Ashley's comment. She says, "Please explain what Marxism is." Marxism is, to my understanding, is dividing people up in order to create a socialistic society.
Yeah, so she mentioned terms like proletariat and bourgeoisie and things like this. On a layperson level, Marxism is primarily concerned with economics.
Yeah.
And especially when Karl Marx critiqued his system there, it was an economic critique of basically the haves and the have-nots. And these two classes of persons would be at really a cultural war and an actual civil war with each other to push forward the change, the revolution of the system. So it's really an economic critique. And so when people use the term cultural Marxism, that may not be the best accurate term, but it fits for what we use it to mean, is taking from the economic system, put it into America today, and you can't really pit the haves versus the have-nots as Karl Marx could in our system because it's capitalistic, but you can do it along other fractured lines within the country, like race or gender.
So here's the way I've seen it too: is that Karl Marx, he wanted power, and back in his day, he sought power by dividing people, and he did that in Russia, right? The Bolsheviks, right? The Bolshevik means what does it mean? Majority, and they were anything but the majority. But in order to have that revolution, though, you've got to first make people, how can I say it, discontent, upset.
Yeah.
And so he did that in Russia by pitting the nobles against the rest of the society. And so he used economics that way. So you have Marxists in America. I had a friend of mine from seminary. He's from Africa a while back, and he said, James, America is the only country where your poor people are fat. So in order to use economics to the point where it would lead to revolution, couldn't do it. Can't do it. You got to get people hungry in order for them to revolt in that way. It happened in France, right? When they were
you got
hungry.
to agitate them.
Yeah, you got to agitate them. But throughout the years, in history, they've been able to use economics because people were hungry. What was Maria Antoinette famous line? Let them eat cake, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were hungry. Well, you can't do that in America. So what do? You use race, right? And the scars from the past. So I think Marx, you're right. Marx, he wrote about economic systems, but my question is, was Marx final aim power, political power? And if that's the case, if Marx had to write his book today in America, would he use economics or would he use race? Do you see what I'm saying?
He would use whatever goes after the power, right?
Exactly. So because I think his end goal was power, and yes, he used economics, and that's what critical race theory comes out of, right? And so again, I'm wondering whether or not did he care so much about economics or did he care so much about power? So, but regardless, in this country nowadays, Marxists, because they can't get people to revolt so long as everybody's fed, what do you use? Race. You use race to get people discontent. You circulate and you use CNN and MSNBC and the major networks to convince people, not only blacks, but even a large majority, a large majority, but at least a significant percentage of whites, that police are killing unarmed black men and have been doing so for years, killing thousands and thousands of unarmed black men. So you see, the sin and the spirit of slavery hasn't gone anywhere. Still here. And they're using it to divide for the ultimate goal. And these are Marxists. BLM, they're Marxists, right? I believe a lot of the players that are moving behind the scenes, Marxists, right? I believe Marxists, where are we on? YouTube. I believe Marxists were heavily influential in the presidential campaign. There's a rumor they gave one of the candidates' family $1.8 billion, right? So,
not all would see themselves as Marxists. So the people
Correct.
behind the scenes, they may call themselves, like Patrice Cullors, the leader of
Yes.
BLM, says,
Yes.
I'm a trained Marxist. But not all who think like them recognize it. So
correct.
They would not say we're Marxists. They would reject it because they don't really know what it is, what that means.
Yeah.
But in fact, they are operating and thinking like and pushing towards goals of
That's right.
Marxism.
That's right. That's right. When you start advocating for the government to start taking over large sections of the economic life in America, whether it's healthcare, right, or whether it's education, now Biden's pushing, right. What was the famous saying? Education and healthcare was great in Cuba. That's what the Castro brothers brought. When you start doing that without even knowing it, because you don't know your history and you don't know, I think, the basic nature of man, like you said, they're advocating for those things, not even knowing that those are socialistic characteristics. The socialistic characteristics.
It fights against the fundamental framework, one of the fundamental frameworks of America of not consolidated power,
Yes.
but power that's delegated and spreads, that's not centralized.
That's
That's
right.
one of the great evils and
That's right.
things that can go bad in any country is when
That's right.
power is consolidated among the few.
That's right.
The American system made it so that power is not consolidated
That's right.
in Washington, D.C., or even in Springfield or a capital city,
Yep.
but among the communities. That was one of the geniuses of the American system.
Yep. And it was supposed to be that way. And where, Jack, where did we first see that? Where did we first see the decentralization of power in antiquity, recorded antiquity, that's near and dear to us? So much so that when they wanted a king, here's what the king's going to do.
Yeah, you see this framework in the ancient nation of Israel, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so when they wanted a king, right, the prophet Samuel says, okay, here's what he's going to do. He's going to take your lands. He's going to take the best of your fields. He's going to take this. He's going to take, and give it to his servants. And that's exactly what happened, even under the good King David, right? That's what happened. But I don't, maybe it's just me, I don't get why men can't see that. The best federal government is a weak federal government. Go ahead.
So when Tim Scott says these things, that America's not a racist country, no wonder he stirs up a hornet's nest, because this is their whole leverage. This is the whole, well, not the whole, but this is the majority of their way to twist the screw on America.
Correct.
To conform to what they want. And so when he goes after that screw, that large weapon they have, it's a real problem for them.
It's a real problem for them. So much so let's get to this article here. The author is Clay Kane, as you can see here. Tim Scott's rebuttal to Joe Biden was fatally flawed, and I'm going to show you where Mr. Kane's argument is fatally flawed. Goes on, I'll read. Wednesday night, President Joe Biden delivered his first address before a joint service of Congress, a speech full of optimism. Oh, goodness. Okay. A speech full of optimism, policy priorities, and an expansive vision for the future. The only thing expansive was the government. But anyway, I wasn't surprised that the Republican Party chose to put South Carolina Senator Tim Scott forward for their rebuttal. In this case, 15 minutes of dissembling in the service of the obvious plea to voters who do not like him. One of the main requirements for today's black Republicans appears to be the tricky logic of downplaying racism while simultaneously playing the race card. That is what he just said Tim Scott did, right? Tim Scott, right? Tricky logic of downplaying racism while simultaneously playing the race card. Scott was clearly ready to perform that number last night. He quickly went viral for his rebuttal to Biden, saying, "I get called Uncle Tom and the N-word by progressives." Minutes later, he added, "I hear me clearly, America is not a racist country." Then Mr. Kane starts to, how shall we say, get into the meat of his rejection of Tim Scott. Here he says, "There are two big problems with that take. First, it's hard to imagine a country where people are calling you the N-word as not being racist. And then second, as much as Scott's pronouncement of an unracist America may have appealed to some Republican white voters, it wasn't an actual rebuttal to Biden's remarks. Biden never said America was a racist country." Okay, before we go any further, what do you say there, Jack?
I mean, maybe he didn't say those words in that speech, but it is certainly the mantra of the Democrat Party.
It is the mantra of the Democrat Party. And before I get into his first and second points, let's blow this foolishness that Biden never said is a racist country. Never used those words. But let me just play you a clip from there. Here it is.
And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism. We're not going to ignore that either. My fellow Americans, look, we have to come together to heal the soul of this nation. It was nearly a year ago before her father's funeral when I spoke with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's young daughter. She's a little tight, so I was kneeling down to talk to her so I could look her in the eye. She looked at me, she said, "My daddy changed the world." Well, after the conviction of George Floyd's murderer, we can see how right she was if we have the courage to act as a Congress. We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress.
We all see what it says, injustice on the neck of black Americans. And by his own words, the number one problem, he says his intelligence says, is white supremacy. So he may not have used those words, but if he's saying that the number one problem facing America, white supremacy, I don't know, Jack. How is that not saying America's a racist?
No, of course. That's exactly what he's saying.
That's exactly what he's saying. Dude's not honest. But let's deal with real quickly. His thing says, first, it is hard to imagine a country where people are calling you the N-word as not being racist. So if you have two people in the country that use the N-word, that makes it a racist country. Jack. It's logical. It's logical. Two people now define the whole of 350 million. That's logical, right, Jack? That's logical, right?
Well, I mean, it's logical if you're a Democrat, I suppose, but for a clear-thinking individual, that's
my
not way
goodness.
logic and reasoning is supposed to work anyway.
Oh my goodness. It's just, and people.
So I think Tim Scott really he said it too softly, and this is what the conservative movement really must be doing more. Instead of playing defense continually, America's
Absolutely.
not racist, America's not racist. We need to take the rhetorical offense against them and say, you guys are the actual racists.
Absolutely.
So later on in his speech, Tim Scott, he said this. He said, 100 years ago in classrooms, kids were once taught the color of their skin was the most important characteristic, and if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. Today, kids are being taught that the color of their skin defines them again, and if they look a certain way, they're an oppressor. So instead of constantly playing defense and trying not to lose ground, the conservatives and those who are actually on the side of righteousness need to take rhetorical offense and say, you guys are racist. You guys are bad people for saying white people are inherently, intrinsically, implicitly racist.
Yeah.
You guys are the bad people.
Exactly. And I think that was in the clip he said, right?
Yeah, later on. He says it.
Oh, I thought that was in the clip we played. Okay. Maybe I was looking at that.
It might have been the clip too. I don't remember.
Yeah. So, but again, I don't understand. I personally don't understand. Well, I guess I do. I think there's a huge spiritual blindness going on. But I don't understand how whites and blacks alike can now adopt the premise that you can attach guilt simply based on skin color. I don't get it. And I've always said this. If I look at it, whether you're white or black, if you adopt the premise that you can judge an entire group based on their skin color, can you say for certain you wouldn't be a slave trader 400 years ago? Of course you would. You've already adopted the principle that led to it. You've already embraced the thinking that goes behind slavery by itself. To deem someone less than or guilty simply based on skin color.
Well, you can probably say they would be because the way they dehumanize people, that is what the slave trade. So the party who dehumanizes people is the party who is going to be prone to trading people.
Yeah.
That's who they would be back then.
Yeah.
Because they don't value people.
That's the exact mindset that goes into slavery. And they're buying into it. And so if I simply say, are you going to make someone, are you saying that someone is guilty, immoral guilt based on skin color, then how are you any different than the slave traders 400 years ago? Because that's exactly what they did. It's exactly what they did. But again, you're right. Tim Scott, boy, did he strike a nerve. And so now you have this guy going back to the article. First, it is hard to imagine a country where people who are calling the N-word as not being racist. I think there's 8,000 people, they say, in America who believe that the earth is still flat. To those 8,000, now can you say America's an ignorant country, void of any scientific reality? Of course not. He would never say that. But again, the arguments that leftists, the arguments that they use, they're not even hard to refute. Doesn't make sense. A few people using the N-word, now you color the whole country as racist. Second, here's what he says. As much as Scott's pronouncement of an unracist America may have appealed to some Republican white voters, it wasn't an actual rebuttal of Biden's remark. We played the clip. Again, you can play games all you want. If you're saying that the number one problem in America, it's white supremacy, I don't know, either he's not smart or he's disingenuous, Jack. You pick. Either one, because logic doesn't seem to be his strong suit when making arguments here. Clearly, that is the mindset of not only Joe Biden, but I think Democrats and I'll just say it, the Democrat, that's their logic. They have to continue to push this race thing, to push it over and over and over again. And let's even ignore the fact that this racist, bigoted country elected a black man president twice. Let's forget that too, right? You have to forget that. You have to completely ignore that. But it is what it is. What say you, Jack?
Yeah. So the man who wrote that article, I think his name is Clay.
Yep.
In the face of obvious facts, he believes this, and the left believes these things. And so I was talking to a few people last week about this, and what they realized, and they're not Christians, they're not typically religious or political, but they realized something changed. Where the old mantra was, if you're young and not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're old, not a conservative, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
That's not true anymore, because people are coming out of colleges and retaining their liberal belief system, because it's actually transitioned into a social religion for them. This is why they can believe all these things in the face of such clear and obvious evidence to the contrary.
Say that again. I want to make sure I followed you.
So before, where these things are strictly relegated to the political, where when you were young, you could be a liberal, you could be the bleeding heart liberal for these causes, but when you got old and you got money, you got land, you cared about these things, you would change the conservative side, you'd regain your senses, right? Not so anymore. Now the liberal belief system is continuing on into the time of family and marriage and money and careers, because it's become a social religion to them. They are now true believers in the social religion that's being pushed by the Democrat Party.
So you're saying it's a social religion. What in their religion, what is their God and what is their redemption? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So it depends. If you're talking strictly about CRT, they would
the leftists. Just talk to me about when they got a family, and they started to pay taxes, they would wake up and they would turn over conservative. You're saying that's no longer happening because now it's a religion, right? And so as you get older, they're not switching over to conservatism. They're staying liberals even after they pay taxes and they have kids. What I'm saying is, if that's the socialistic religion, what is their God and what is their redemption, if there is any?
The great redeemer and the great redeemer and the great savior of that liberal religion is government. That is the end all be all.
That's their God, right? Government is okay. And their ultimate redemption or their ultimate service unto their God is what? Paying taxes? No, it's not paying taxes. Making a utopia? Saving people against their will? I mean, what is their chief devotion to this God, the government? Do you see what I'm saying?
So their chief devotion is that it is their God, is what they worship, and it's also that mechanism that they use to push their religion. So it's going to have the elements of the violent religions that convert people by force against their will, and that is the very real mechanism that they can get you to do it. This is why so take, for example, consider that the religious symbolism among all religions. The left has it as well. That's what the mask is. The mask is a religious symbol. That's why they're not satisfied with some people not wearing it or wearing it. You will wear the symbol of their religion, the mask. If you don't conform to that symbol of their religion, you will be ostracized. It's really become a religious fervor. There's no other way to understand it other than a belief structure that has come out of the political left to believe all these things and push them despite evidence to the contrary. A mask being evidence of that social religion.
Now, Ashley says she thinks their God is social justice. I think the social justice is a religious right or a religious function of the government. Right, Ashley? I think the government is their God.
Right, so liberal liberal politics, whatever the liberal political issue is, whether it's CRT or it's feminism or whatever it is, that is part of their sacrament. Whatever the cause is, that's part of their sacrament.
Yeah.
So it's definitely entwined in there. It's not the leading. It's not the lead. That's not what's wagging the tail.
Yeah, she says
it's part of their sacraments.
Yeah. It ultimately comes back to government, and again, we're not. How can I say this? I don't think we're making this up out of whole cloth. Simply look at the scriptures, because they are able to make one wise, are they not? You look at the history all the way back to the Tower of Babel, right? Nimrod, the government. What happens once man worship at the altar of government? Then he necessarily always turns towards heaven. And that was the Tower of Babel. That's what I believe the Antichrist will be. He's going to be a one world government. I believe that is what Daniel was talking about. That when man is united as one in government, it will rebel, right? In Revelation, we see the Antichrist railing against heaven, right? God in the place where he lives, heaven. And so I think in essence, we talk about Marxism, right? Marxism, I think he has a government system in order to achieve power. But what was the end result of that? I mean, Karl Marx was a godless man. He hated God, hated him.
Yeah.
And I think his book was what was dedicated to Lucifer, wasn't it? Wasn't that Karl Marx? Either that was Marx.
You got me there.
I think that was Marx. See what Marx said? No, it was Marx. It was Marx. To the fallen angel Lucifer, hated God, hate God. And so when you worship the government and you worship man, it's in rebellion to God. And ultimately, I think it always turns heavenward in rejection of the Creator God. So, all right, Jack, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Dealing with Tim Scott here. Try to do this later on in the week. And I'll bring you back on. But I appreciate it, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pastor James.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. And so we're going to turn now to the next topic here. After dealing with all those politics and all of the depressing clips dealing with politics, let's turn now to a hero. As always, guys, you can go on our Facebook page and you can see the articles and the basis by which we talk here. I want to turn your attention to what's going on in Canada with the pastor there. Do you remember the pastor that stood up and told the police to get out of his church? Well, Canadian court empowers police to do anything necessary to disrupt church, fine pastor. He is. Calgary police obtained secret warrant to use any force necessary to disrupt church service. They had egg on their face. They really, really don't like this guy because he stood up, right? Let me see if I can pronounce his name right. Arthur Pawlowski. He's the lead pastor, Pastor Arthur Pawlowski. He was the one that told him to get out. He's known internationally for telling the Canadian health officials he does not cooperate with Nazis. He's facing more pushback from the government, and he has a video that we're now going to show you. Here it is.
Hello friends, this is Pastor Artur Pawlowski. I am sure you are aware of the battle that I am in the middle of, a battle for my life. They want me in jail. They want to arrest us only because we dare to worship our God, and we want to do it in peace. They're coming very heavy. They're bringing documents. They're bringing SWAT team. They're bringing health inspectors, police officers, and the bylaw officers. But there is a good news. Rebel News decided to help us, and they're hiring the best lawyers in the country to keep me out of jail. If you want to help, please to go to safeartur.com and you can help me stay out of jail. Please support, please help. Let's push the evil away. Let's be the light in this time of darkness. And I'm going to go this Saturday to the church, and I'm going to worship God freely, just like every free citizen of this country in a free and democratic society should, without interference.
Pastor, I'm not sure we live in a free democratic society anymore, either in Canada or the United States of America. Look at this. It says, go down here, the warrant furthermore forbids the pastor or anyone else opening on his behalf from interfering with officials should they attempt to gain access to the church or try to reach Pawlowski. If anyone tries to impede their action, the judge has permitted law enforcement officers to do anything necessary. They are so upset. They were so embarrassed by the video that the pastor kicked them out of his church as they were worshiping. And they can't have that. The government has to flex their muscle, and they're going to come after this man. He's not free to worship in his own building. It goes on, according to Calvary Court documents, the pastor shall grant access to any executive officer as defined in the Alberta Public Health Act in order for him or her to attend at the property without notice during the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. to allow the executive officer to exercise his or her powers under Section 59 of the Act. If Pawlowski or any other person denies access to government agents or hinders or interferes with the executive officer in the exercise of his or her powers, any police officer shall be permitted to accompany and assist the executive officer and use such reasonable force as they consider appropriate to gain access to the premises. They're basically saying, never again. Pastor, you'll never kick us out again, ever. We want access to your houses of worship. We want the right to come into and inspect your church, even if you're in the middle of service. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They're coming, and they had egg on their face, and they are retaliating. This is in Canada. This is in Canada. We had something similar here in Chicago. The mayor of Chicago was blocking parishioners from going to their own parking lots. In one case, they forced their way in. This is where we find ourselves. This is it. So what do we do? What can we do? What's the point? Where do we go? Before we go any further on this, let's examine the spiritual reality of what is going on. Look at verse 24. Therefore God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature, and the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passions for one another. men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. So there you have it. And we see it playing out. The rise of homosexuality in our culture goes hand in hand with the rejection and, dare I say, the absolute hatred of God. And so pray for this pastor. Pray for him. Let me see, what is his name again? Author Pawlowski. Pray for him. He needs help. He needs your prayers. I'm sure Canada's going to try to make an example out of this man. Who knows? This may be coming to America sooner than we thought. All right, here's the next one. A few quick hitters. We started off with the main one about Joe Biden and his address, Tim Scott's rebuttal, and the left going crazy. We're just going to do a few quick hitters, and then we'll be done. So let's look at this one. Oh, I don't know if I can say this here. I'll try. I'm just reading what is being reported here. One American News Network. Florida legislature passes election strengthening bill. Governor DeSantis says he will sign it. Boy, don't think the Democrats are happy with this. Whew. On Thursday, reports said the bill passed in both of the House and Senate, and Governor Ron DeSantis signaling he will sign it. The conservative leader actually called for the legislation back in March at a State of the Union address. So what will this do? Look down here. It says the legislation would add ID requirements for voters requesting to vote by mail. Would make voters request mail ballots for each federal election instead of once every 4 years, and would limit some drop box locations and hours. The bill would also restrict someone's ability to drop off ballots to family members, as well as how many ballots could actually be dropped off by one person. Here's the thing. I don't see why this is a Democratic or a Democrat or Republican issue. To the Christian, again, we're always trying to give the Christian point of view, are we not? To the Christian, what is wrong with having honest elections? Should we not be the people pushing forward for truth and honesty? If you call yourself a Democrat and you call yourself a Christian, would you not want honesty in all things? Would you not want voter IDs? Would you not want honest outcomes? If Biden won honestly, no problem. If Trump lost honestly, no problem. Isn't that what we all want as Christians? As Christians, isn't that what we want if we serve a God of truth? Should we not want it to be honest? And so why should voter IDs anger any Christian? I don't get it. I don't get it. We should be fine with that. All right. Kim, what did you say? This behavior will come for all of us. Kim, I hope you're wrong. But I fear you may be right. You may be right. He is an example of how we must stand for what's right. God bless him. She's talking about Pastor Pawlowski. Absolutely right. So, okay, this Florida law is going to be a problem. You're going to see the Democrats. They're going to go after it. They're never, ever going to let that go. They're not. They're simply not. They're not. Because voter IDs is racist. If you didn't know it, it's racist. All right, a few more quick hitters. This is a fun one. I don't understand his. That's a him. Former Olympic gold medalist Bruce Jenner says biological boys should not be allowed to compete in girls' sports because it's not fair. Why is that, Bruce? Why is that? California gubernatorial candidate Caitlyn Jenner, an Olympic gold medal winning decathlon. Caitlyn didn't do that. Bruce did. Caitlyn didn't win that gold medal decathlon. That was Bruce Jenner. Go back and look. Caitlyn didn't exist yet. Bruce won that. Caitlyn didn't win that. Bruce won that. Winning decathlon, who is now transgender, i.e. is now confused, said on Saturday that biological males who identify as transgender should not be allowed to compete in girls' sports because it's not fair. Bruce, what do you mean? This is a question of fairness, Jenner told TMZ when asked for a reaction to legislation being passed in states across the U.S. that ban biological males from competing against girls in school sports. That's why I oppose biological males who are trans competing in girls' sports in schools. It's just not fair. We heard that, Bruce. Tell us why. And we have to protect girls' sports in our schools, Jenner continued. I'm sorry if you really think you're a woman. See there's something about Bruce that knows he's still Bruce. There's something about Bruce that knows Caitlyn is a fraud. How could you take this? He goes, when asked if those beliefs were delegitimizing to a person's gender identity, Jenner responded, "Have a good day." Hey, that's an honest question, Bruce. Honest question. If they ask you that your beliefs are delegitimizing this transgender ideology, delegitimizing to a person's gender identity, Bruce had no answer. Have a good day. Jenner tweeted out a link to the interview writing, "I didn't expect to get asked this on my Saturday morning coffee run, but I'm clear about where I stand. It's an issue of fairness, and we need to protect girls' sports in our schools." I understand where you stand, Bruce. Question is how you get there. That's the problem, Bruce. That is the problem. That is the problem, Bruce. Please explain, please explain, please explain. Please explain. He can't. That's why he left. Bruce. All right. That's it. We're pretty much done this morning. I want to encourage you again to go to for such a time as this.today. Go to for such a time as this.today. There you can find all of our new material. Always stay connected for such a time as this.today. And we're going to close because when I was young, they used to start off TV with the Star Spangled Banner, and they used to end. So we're going to end like they end, saluting our country and our flag. Thank you. Try to be back tomorrow at 10. God bless. And we'll have new guests, other topics as we go live. And encourage you to send us an email, topics that we can actually cover for you. God bless. Have a good day.
Hello, friends. This is Pastor Artie Pawlowski. I am sure you are aware.
Oh, let's try that again. Here we go.